Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord, and welcome to another episode of the Shiny Review. Happy holidays, everyone, for those who are tuning in, and I'm glad that you chose to spend a little bit of your day-to-day with this video. We've got 3 cards that we need to talk about: a new Produce SSR for Fuyuko, Support SSR for Mei, and Support SR for Chiyuki. They're all permanent, well, aside from Event Chiyuki, so you can worry about getting these cards later if you feel like you want to save for New Year's. First up, we have Fuyuko. Streetlight has wrapped up their 3rd SSR set just in time for the end of the year, with Fuyuko putting a bow on things. Fuyuko has arrived as a vocal visual unit who has similar buffing styles to her original SSR. In most ways, she's a direct upgrade to Fuyuko 1 if you opt to use her on a visual team. Her passives are much nicer and a fair bit more convenient. Her secondary 2-star passive is a little weird overall, but there's a nice sense of completion with her kit. If anything, the major marks against Fuyuko 3 is the fact that her better buff doesn't last particularly long. Even some of the previous permanent SSRs have had stronger buffs that last longer, so forcing only 2 turns out of a 40% vocal buff or 60% visual buff seems a tad unnecessary. The link appeals are still fairly underwhelming, and I'm surprised that her memory appeal is weaker than Asahi 3's. Her roles are buffer, attacker, she has attention up, and she does buff removal. I slightly recommend pulling for Fuyuko. She is a permanent unit, so she can come around eventually, but of course, if she's your favorite, go ahead and pull. Fuyuko's initial skill is a Vocal 3.0 appeal that applies 2 buffs. The first is a Vocal 40% buff for 2 turns, and the second is a Vocal Dance Visual 5% buff for 4 turns. This links into a Vocal 1.5 appeal. At max, she unlocks a Visual 4.0 appeal that applies a 60% visual buff for 2 turns, and a Vocal Dance Visual 10% buff for 4 turns. This links into a Visual 1.5 appeal. Fuyuko's 1-star passive is a Vocal Visual 25% up and Attention 25% up that requires an active vocal buff. This has a 20% chance to activate 3 times, and this also unlocks an additional plus 50 Vocal Uncap. At 2 stars, she gains 2 passives. The first is a Vocal Visual 45% up and Attention 40% up, and requires an active visual buff. This has a 20% chance to activate 3 times. Her second passive is a Visual 20% up that requires your mental to be 74% or lower. This has a 50% chance to activate twice. Her 3-star uncap is a Vocal Visual plus 100, and her 4-star uncap is a Visual plus 150. Fuyuko's memory appeal, once maxed out, is a Vocal Visual 50% buff for 5 turns and links into 2 separate attacks. The first is a Vocal 0.5 to 2.5 appeal that removes all vocal buffs, and the second is a Visual 0.5 to 2.5 that removes all visual buffs. So keep in mind, this means that you're going to need to have a combination of 4 vocal and 4 visual buffs in order to completely max out this memory appeal, which could be relatively tough to do. For the support recommendations, the hardest part about deciding who to pick for Fuyuko currently is that there are not a ton of Straylight specific options that feel particularly good to use. Obviously, the limited Mei is a pretty good option. Most of the Asahi cards don't quite work since they're dance, so your options are relatively, well, limited. You could always opt to include an Asahi support purely for the mastery benefits, but that's ultimately your call. All the supports I've listed, such as Juri, Yuika, Toru, and Kiriko, are all fairly decent to really strong supports in the current game state that should help out Fuyuko pretty well. The alternatives you can opt for will more or less revolve around whatever you feel you can use most. Since Fuyuko is primarily a vocal unit until she's maxed out, you might just want to consider any major vocal cards that have been doing well for you. Once you max her out, visual units begin to truly shine, so keep that in mind as you pick up extra copies. For the team recommendation, Visual Straylight is by far the best home for Fuyuko 3 currently. Vocal Straylight is not too far behind, so keep that in mind if you lack Asahi 2. That team revolves more around Mei 3 than it does Fuyu 3, and there isn't really a perfectly useful Asahi on there just yet, but it's getting there. You'll be ideally using Straylight only appeals, especially if you have limited support Mei's appeal. For cards you can consider for the rest of the team, Straylight almost always wants buffer units to help fuel their appeals. As such, any cards such as buffer-style Rinzeis, Choco 1, or the Choco SR, or Chiyuki 5, well, basically any cards that provide multi-turn buffs, are greatly appreciated, so adjust as you can. Fuyuko's scores. As a center, she earns an A. Fuyuko's memory appeal is pretty comparable to Asahi 3's, but it lacks the same amount of damage. While the 50% buff to the appropriate stats is appreciated, you don't exactly get to keep them for very long after you link appeal. It still hits very hard, but you're gonna really depend on that link a ton, which might be a detriment if Fest ends too quickly. As a unit, she earns an A-. I think really the main thing that holds Fuyuko back is that her best buffs only last for 2 turns. We've had cards released well before her with much better buffs that last longer, so why Fuyuko 3 drew the short straw will probably never be explained, other than just that she's a permanent. Which is probably the actual answer, in all truth. Her passives are good, her appeals are fine, and her stat uncaps are greatly appreciated. She's not a groundbreaking unit by any means, but a solid unit to pick up for Stray Light. Next we have Mei. Mei's first permanent SSR support is a bit of a surprise, as we all figured she would be the vocal support to match Asahi's dance and Fuyuko's visual. She offers a fair amount of SP for those who frequent dance lessons, while also having some decently strong passives. The big downside is her almost nonsensical 4-star appeal. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost, and Stamina support, and her unique support skill is Dance Mastery SP, reaching plus 14 at level 75. Her support appeal does scale, starting at a Dance 2.5, working its way up to a 3.0 at level 80. Her TFD idea is mental, and her insight token for grad is also mental. Mei's 1-star passive is a dance 30% up that requires you to be in the dance position. This has a 20% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is a dance 60% up and attention 30% up that requires Mei on your team. This has a 20% chance to activate once. Her 3-star uncap is a plus 100 to dance, and her 4-star appeal is a dance 4.5 that reduces your vocal and visual by 30% for 3 turns. Her event passive is a dance 30% up that requires you to be in the dance position, and it has a 10% chance to activate twice. Mei earns anywhere from a B+ to an A-. I think she's fairly good. In a fair number of ways, Mei feels like a janky crossover between a first-generation Hokago support and the Dance SR Yuika support. Dance 60% up is certainly nice, though you might not find yourself grabbing her 4-star appeal outside of produce runs, where you really want the damage and don't value your other appeal stats. The SP Mastery helps keep her safely out of the lower B grades. I slightly recommend pulling for her. Again, she is permanent. I think she has some applications for dance teams, especially for Hokago, if you just don't have quite the right supports for it yet. Otherwise, it's just kind of a weird card that can assist Dance Stray Light. But really, I feel the thing about this Mei is that she's built for the event SR Stray Light cards that are built around debuffs. But because she doesn't give that many debuffs, it still doesn't really feel all that useful. I don't know, she's a weird card. Lastly, we have Chiyuki. New Chiyuki is a fairly low-standard event SR, with not a whole lot going on for her that's particularly enticing. Her Dance Mastery is weaker than the SR Tenka from a little while back, and her passives aren't particularly impressive either. The card art is cute, and the story I'm sure is fine, but I wouldn't really use this card if I had the option. Her support skills are Idol's Bond, Promise Recovery, Rest Boost, and Trouble Guard, and her unique support skill is Dance Mastery Dance, reaching plus 5 at level 65. Her TFD idea is Dance, and her insight token for grad is Vocal. Chiyuki's 1-star passive is a dance 12% up that requires you to be in the dance position. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 2-star passive is dance 20% up that requires the turn count to be 3 or earlier. This has a 30% chance to activate once. Her 3-star uncap is a plus 50 to dance, and her 4-star appeal is a dance 2.3 that applies a mental regen of 2% for 3 turns. Her event passive is a dance 8% up that requires Chiyuki on your team, and it has a 30% chance to activate twice. Chiyuki earns a C-. Much like the Tenka we mentioned not too long ago, Chiyuki is nothing particularly special, and only has a merit over Tenka in that her event passive is actually on brand rather than being off-stat vocal. That being said, the 4-star appeal is much less useful, as 2% regen really amounts to nothing in the long run. She's definitely a filler dance support until you find stronger options. You might as well farm for her while she's around, since Collabofest is relatively low effort and pretty fun once you actually know what in the world is going on. And that's going to do it for the video. Thank you so much as always for watching, and again, happy holidays from us here at the channel, from the Discord, and everywhere that we appreciate shiny colors. Next time we'll be talking about whatever banner comes next. If you have anything you'd like us to talk about, feel free to let us know in the comments. Till next time, I've been Cho, thanks for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.